Okay, good afternoon. Today we're going to discuss about chapter 2 of our topic, which is about recruitment and placement of workers. But before that, let me summarize last week's discussion, wherein we discussed chapter 1 about preliminary considerations. So we've learned on that chapter the different definitions or the terms like what is labor relations, labor standards, welfare laws, and other terms. No? And then we also learn about the coverage and exclusionary clause, wherein there are uh, certain types of workers who are excluded in the labor standards or some benefits under the labor standards. And of course, the coverage of labor code, which is applicable uh, whenever there is an employee-employer relationship. Okay, and then we also learn about the types of workers, and then the importance of the relationship of employer-employee relationship, and the different tests on how to determine if the worker or there is an employer-employee relationship. And what are the different control tests? Two types actually, the economic and the control test. And then the elements of employer-employee relationships such as selection and engagement, payment of wages, power of dismissal, and power to control. We've also learned about the different categories of workers such as the managerial employees, supervisory and rank and file employees. So we've learned the importance, or why is it that we need to categorize the different workers, like in the case of management, supervisory, and rank and file. The reason for this is managerial employees are not allowed to form or join a union. No? Of course, for supervisors, they can form a union in the same uh, with their other supervisors. However, they cannot join with the union for rank and file employees. Okay, and then lastly, we also learn about the different categories of employment, such as regular and non-regular and casual. Okay, example of a non-regular employees or employment are those probationary, fixed term, project based, and etc. Okay, so those are the things we've discussed about last week for the chapter 1 of our subject. Okay, now our for today's topic, we'll talk about recruitment and placement of workers. No, okay. So when you say recruitment and placement, this is actually any act of canvassing, enlisting, contracting, transporting, utilizing, hiring or procuring workers, and includes referrals, contract services, promising or advertising for employment, locally or abroad, whether for profit or not. So again, recruitment and placement involves the act of first canvassing, enlisting, contracting, transporting, utilizing, hiring, or procuring workers. And referrals are also included, no? So, and it is not necessary whether the one who recruit uh, gains some profit or not. Okay, so what are the essential elements of recruitment? So, the essential element of recruitment is the offer or promise of employment. So, without this, a person cannot be liable for illegal recruitment. Okay, so indicated by the act of collecting payment for passports, training fees, placement fees, medical tests, or requiring a person to submit pictures, birth certificates, and NBI clearance. Okay, so as long as you offer or you gave a promise of employment to a certain person, so that is actually what is important, no, for you to be involved in recruitment. Okay. Now, with regards to material consideration, so money is not an essential element of recruitment and placement. So as mentioned earlier, it doesn't mean that whether you profit or not, as long as you do all those actions, no, like canvassing, enlisting, procuring, etc. So illegal recruitment can happen even if the recruitment was done for free. So under the legal definition, recruitment and placement can take place even if it was not done for profit. Okay. The Supreme Court held, there's a case on this, no, wherein the Supreme Court held that the number of persons dealt with is not an essential ingredient of the act of recruitment and placement of workers. So just even for one person that you recruit, so that, or a person you offered, no, an employment, so it is not necessary there are several or few. Okay, even just for one person, that illegal recruitment or recruitment already constitute, no, or there's already a recruitment. Now, referral is considered as recruitment activity. So when you say referral, it is the act of passing along or forwarding of an applicant for employment after an initial interview of an applicant to a selected employer or placement officer. Okay, so for example, if you are trying to forward a particular applicant or person for employment after you initially screen the applicant and you pass it to the employer or the placement officer, that already constitutes referral. So person who referred an applicant for employment to an unlicensed recruitment agency can be held liable for illegal recruitment. Okay, so even you're not a registered or a licensed recruiter, or even in your personal way, you referred a person for employment to an unlicensed recruitment agency, you will now be liable for illegal recruitment. Okay, because you referred someone or a person for employment to an agency which is not licensed. Okay, so again, so be careful with that, no, when you refer or if you involve in this particular act, be sure that if you refer a person, be sure that you refer it to a licensed recruitment agency. Otherwise, you'll be liable for illegal recruitment. Who can engage in recruitment and placement of workers? So as a general rule, only public employment offices can engage in recruitment and placement of workers. However, as an exemption under Article 25, it gives the private sector the privilege to engage in recruitment and placement of workers, but limited to the following. First is a private employment agency, private recruitment entity, and manning agency. So let's discuss this one by one. Again, as a general rule, only those public employment offices can engage in recruitment. However, as a matter of privilege, the private sectors were given the chance, no, or the privilege to engage in recruitment and placement as long as there are things or requirements that they need to comply. Okay, so when you say private employment agency, this refers to a person or entity who recruits workers for employment for a fee which is charged directly or indirectly against the workers or employers or both. Again, private employment agency refers to a person or entity who recruits workers for employment for a fee which is charged directly or indirectly against the workers or employers or both. Okay, so it is not necessary an organization, a company, even for just one person that recruits workers for employment for, of course, for a fee, that already is an act of recruitment. No, since the person recruiting is a private person, or the agency is owned by a private person. So that's already a private employment agency. And of course, who charges a certain fee, no, in exchange for the opportunity for the job. Okay, so but there are also private agencies wherein they charge, or sometimes the employers will pay everything, no, and of course for the workers, they don't pay anything, since it will be covered by the employer. Okay, so that is private employment agency. Now, private recruitment entity refers to a person or association who recruits workers for employment without charging directly or indirectly any fee against the worker. So, different with a private employment agency wherein they require or they charge a certain fee, no, for either the worker or the employer, or for both. The private recruitment agency doesn't charge anything, no. All they need to do is to recruit workers for employment. Okay. Then money agency refers to a person, partnership, or corporation who recruits and deploys seafarers for maritime employment. Okay. So for seafarers, so the agency, it's called money agency, no? Those who hire or recruits mga seafarers. Okay. So please take note that recruitment and placement of workers by the private sector is a mere privilege. Recruitment or money agencies must first obtain a license from the regulatory bodies before engaging in any recruitment activity. So in other words, for you not to be charged for illegal recruitment, you must be a licensed recruitment agency, you know, or money agency, wherein you need to comply a certain requirements by the regulating bodies or regulatory bodies before you could start engaging with a recruitment activity. Now, once you are already licensed, there are certain limitations for the use of license, no? So license cannot be used directly or indirectly by any person other than the one in whose favor it was issued. It automatically ceases to be effective when the following occurs. Okay? So whoever the name of the license is, whether it's a company or a certain person for single proprietorship, then it cannot be used by others, no, by other person. So when the following circumstances occur, uh, the license will automatically stop, no, or ceases. Okay, first is if the sole proprietor dies. Then second is if the sole proprietor is upgraded to corporation. And then if the partnership is dissolved, and if partnership or corporation merge or consolidate. Okay, so in other words, it if at first it's a partnership and then it merges with other corporation and it become one, so the license being issued first with the partnership will now cease, no, and then they need to acquire a new license for the corporation. Okay, then secondly, license cannot be transferred, conveyed, or assigned to any person or entity. So in cases there are changes in ownership, so license is automatically revoked since it cannot be transferred or conveyed or assigned to another person or entity. License cannot be used in any place other than that specified in the license or authority, except when the recruitment is done after public employment service office or pursuant to special recruitment authority from POEA. Unsa? Bill. Nasupak. Ay, So again, license cannot be used in any place other than that specified in the license or authority, except when the recruitment is done under Public Employment Service Office or pursuant to Special Recruitment Authority from POEA. So wherever is your registered place, you can only operate there, you know. So if, for example, if you're registered in the Philippines, then you can only operate within the Philippines. So the basis there, or the point there, is what the address or the place stated in the license or authority. Now, for the validity of license, so for if you are a recruitment agency for local employment, the validity is 3 years, no, from the date of issuance. But for overseas employment, so it's for 4 years from date of issuance. Now, for if you're new, or this will be your first time applying for a license, there will be a provisional license to be issued for new applicant, which is valid for 1 year. The reason for this is to ensure compliance to undertaking to deploy 100 workers to its new principal. And once complied, the license will be upgraded to full license valid for the remaining 3 years. Okay. Now, suspension or cancellation of license, and whose jurisdiction is it, no? So, for license may be cancelled or suspended for commission of any of the prohibited acts. Complaints for suspension or cancellation should be filed with the following government agencies. So, if you committed violation for those prohibited acts, the complaints for local employment agencies, it will be brought to the Department of Labor and Employment Regional Office, no? Like, for example, here in Cebu City, if the prohibited act is committed by a particular recruitment agency, and the complaint should be filed at the Dole Regional Office 7. But if it's an overseas employment, it will be brought up to POEA, or the Secretary of Labor and Employment. Okay? So for local employment, that means you are hiring workers for or within the Philippines, no? Employment within the Philippines. But when you say overseas employment, you are deploying workers outside the country or outside the Philippines. That is why it's overseas. Now, there are different types of illegal recruitment, no? First is those carried out by a person who is not the holder of a license or authority. Okay? Again, illegal recruitment is committed once is carried out by a person who is not the holder of a license or authority. So it is an unlicensed recruiter. Then secondly, those carried out by a person, whether licensed or not, who commits any of the prohibited practices enumerated in Article 34 of the Labor Code of the Philippines in case of local employment, and Section 6 of the Migrant Workers Act of 1995 in case of overseas employment. Okay, so those are the two, no? Again, those carried out by unlicensed or doesn't hold a license or authority. And of course, those in violation of Article 34 of the Labor Code of the Philippines, or those commission of prohibited acts, no? Stated in Article 34. And for overseas, Section 6 of migrant workers. Now, there is also what we call qualified illegal recruitment. And there are two kinds, no? Or it is in large scale if it is carried out against 3 or more persons individually or as a group. Okay, so it is again qualified illegal recruitment by large scale if it is carried out against 3 or more persons individually or as a group. In other words, you are illegally recruiting at least 3 or more persons, whether individually, but just one person, or as a group, no? And then it is by a syndicate if it is carried out by a group of 3 or more persons conspiring or confederating with one another in carrying out any illegal or unlawful recruitment activity. So with by a syndicate, there are a group of 3 or more persons, no? Or uh, recruiters who do illegal recruitment. So that is by a syndicate. Large scale, if you are hiring or illegally recruiting 3 or more persons, whether committed by a single person or group, no? That is large scale. So in large scale, it is the number of the persons you are recruiting, no? By a syndicate is the number of persons conspiring, or those illegal recruiters conspiring on or confederating. So if it's a group of 3 or more, that is committed by a syndicate. Now, here are some prohibited acts under the recruitment, legal recruitment, no, as stated in Article 34 of the Labor Code of the Philippines. The first one is charging excessive fees. So I will not, for purposes of discussion and at least to give you a basic idea, here are some prohibited acts mentioned, no, in the Labor Code. So second is publishing false information in relation to recruitment or employment. So in case you give false information to workers, like for example, uh, you are uh, advertising for production workers, but uh, when they are already deployed to that particular place, they are doing uh, another job, no? So that is false information. So you are not giving the right information. Misrepresentation in securing a license. So if in case you're applying for a license and there are certain informations that you did not divulge or misrepresented, so that's one prohibited act. Then inducing a worker already employed to quit his employment in order to offer him to another. Okay, so in other words, you are inviting other workers, no, or try to induce to stop from whatever or his current job or whatever agency is connected, so that you could offer to him another, no, or another employment. So that's also a prohibited act. Then blacklisting of workers, for example, if you're trying to hire a particular technical person, and since he or she did not apply to your agency, you are trying to influence other agencies to blacklist, no, that particular person, so that he or she cannot apply to any of those. Then recruiting workers in harmful jobs. So okay, so of course those can highly hazardous or very dangerous job. And then obstructing inspection in case of visitorial power of the government agencies like DOLE, wherein during their inspection you stop them so that they can inspect your agency or office or whatever things in order to things that you stop them, no, to inspect your office. And failure to file the required reports. Of course, there are certain documents that you need to submit to the agency or to DOLE, for example, and non-compliance of those constitute also prohibited acts. And of course, there are a lot of prohibited acts, no, but as I've said, this is just to give you an idea what are those prohibited acts. Okay, now who are criminally liable? So in case you will be or you will be complained of, no, for illegal recruitment, the officers having control, management, or direction of their business, and the responsible employees or agents thereof are the one who will be filed or be criminally liable, no, for illegal recruitment. Okay, so that's end our topic for today. And again, just to I did not emphasize some of those things because I just want you to be at least have a basic knowledge, no, of what constitute recruitment and what are those things that constitute illegal recruitment. Since for you later on when you start working, so we don't know, no, if probably you will be hired to an recruitment agency. So at least this will give you an idea that you are not working in an authorized, no, an authorized recruitment agency. Okay, so again, there are certain requirements for a particular recruitment agency will be permitted, no, or be allowed to recruit. All the agency or the recruitment agency need to do is to process, no, and get a license or authority. Okay, now again, if you have questions or clarifications, please don't hesitate to message your class Bidal so that she could give me the summary of all your questions and we could discuss those questions on the following Monday or next week, no? So that I would be able to clarify all those things. Also, before I forget, sorry for that. With our last discussion last week, I would just like to make an emphasis, no, with regards to probationary employment. Some of you, based on our assignment, maybe some of you were confused, no, on the probationary period, which is, as I've said, that is 6 months, no, based on our labor code. Now, please take note of the start and end date, no. Now, it is not necessary that you count the 180 days, but the thing there is it's 6 months. Okay, so you just try to uh, to count on the start date. Like for example, if the probationary employment started on January 1, for example. So the employee will become regular once he or she, uh, it's January 1. So the counting here is just like this, no? January 1, February 1, that's the first month. February, March, second month. April, that's the third month. May, fourth month. June, fifth month. July is the sixth month, no? So from January 1 to July 1. However, you need to exclude the first day. So that's July 1, exclude it, and then July 2 will be the regularization date. Okay? So the probationary ends on July 1, and the regularization date starts on July 2. So that's the simple counting of the probationary, which is 6 months. Now, with regards to 180 days, it is only applicable if there are discontinuation or discontinuance of work, no? Like for example, for today, for with our current pandemic, the Department of Labor Employment gave an advisory since there will be skeletal work, or those there are companies who closed down their business because of the pandemic. Now the DOLE gave an advisory to exempt those days, no, in counting for probationary period. Okay, like for example, for the pandemic started on March. Okay, so last week of March, and for example, the business closed down starting March 31. Okay, or let's start with April, for example, and you already hired a probationary starting from February 1, for example. Okay. Now, if your company closed down temporarily starting those months from last week of March, or let's say April 1, it started to close down, no? So that probationary employee, the probationary employment will be affected, no? So assuming the company closed down for April, May, for 2 months, for example. So the counting there of 180 days will exclude April and May, since there is an advisory. It is not the employer's choice, or the employee's choice, no? So both are not responsible for that particular stoppage of work, since the government issued an advisory on that, no? Exempting all those months na nag-close ang employer. Okay? So if that's the case, the counting of 180 days or 6 months will exclude those 2 months, no? From April 1 to end of May. Okay? Or, for example, another situation is if, for example, the employee, due to family emergencies, for example, and the employee was able to uh, ask for a leave of absence, and that employee is still probationary, and the employee asked for 15 days leave of absence without pay, no, because of certain family emergency. Now, as the employer, if you're going to count, those 15 days will be excluded in the counting of probationary period, no? But to be so that it will be documented, if before you allow the employee to go on leave, you must ask the employee to write a letter, no? Asking permission to avail that 15-day leave of absence, and that 15 days will be excluded in the counting of the probationary period. Okay, so in that way, you may follow the 180-day counting, since there are days that the employee did not report, no? Okay, so that's how you apply the 6 months or the 180 days counting for probationary employees. Another thing that I would also like to emphasize on our last topic is the importance of the different types of workers. Like one mention is the overtime work, or there are certain benefits under the labor standards wherein those type of workers are exempted, no, or not excluded in the payment, like for overtime, holiday pay, service incentive leave, and all those things mentioned, or benefits mentioned, no? So that is why it's very important for you to familiarize who are those types of workers being enumerated, so that you cannot pay holidays, for example. Okay, so that's the importance of those things. Okay, and yeah, I think that's all I would like to emphasize on our last meeting's discussion. Okay, again, so if you have questions or clarification, don't hesitate to ask or send your questions to our class bidal, so that our class bidal could give me the summary of your questions, and we're going to discuss it during our group class discussion on scheduled every weekends. Okay, so that's all for now, and again, I hope you've learned something on our topic for today, and again, thank you for listening. Have a nice day.